start muting people because we're about to begin. But just a reminder that while we're in here, if you have any questions or if you want to make a comment, we have our chat open and you're welcome to put something up there. Or if you want, there's a way to raise your hand as well, and we'll have an opportunity for those at the end too. So I'm gonna go ahead and say, Nuki, it's all you.
Okay, so hi to everyone, good to see you. You can see my background today is a different background to the background we've had before. This is one of the views of Tel Aviv. And is Adrian on yet? Because she wasn't on in the beginning, the first week and the first session, and I didn't see her yesterday.
She was there most of the time yesterday.
Okay, but again, exactly as I was starting, I didn't see it because I wanted to say that all of the pictures that we're seeing that include familiar faces, and some of the pictures that we're seeing that are of sites are pictures that I got from Adrian, and I wanted to thank her. And twice I didn't see her, and I don't see her now either. So I thank her now, and hopefully she'll, hopefully I'll see her later and get to thank her again. So I'm going to share the screen. Wait, I need to actually unshare the screen. 1 second. Okay, are you seeing this now? So I lost everyone's faces. So if someone could just unmute for a second. And
Would you press? Yes.
Seeing me, great. Okay, so you can see the PowerPoint. Okay. I don't know where the pictures have gone, but I'm not going to go down in that. As long as you can see, we're going to keep going. So welcome to Tel Aviv. My backdrop picture was a picture of Tel Aviv with the sea, but I like to begin talking about Tel Aviv with the image that we can see, which is the image you see if you come in on the highway from Jerusalem or from the airport. And what you can see is a city that looks like a modern city you could see anywhere in the world. In fact, you can see skyscrapers, you can see lots of cranes because there's lots of building. You can see highways that are actually remarkably empty at this time of the day. When the picture was taken, you can see the train. And you can see the Ayalon. It's not Thames, not Hudson. It does carry water almost all year long, which is quite a big deal in this part of the world, as we already know. Where does the story of Tel Aviv begin? The story of Tel Aviv begins to the south of Tel Aviv in Jaffa. In fact, from this vantage point, we can see some of old Jaffa, and in the distance behind it, we can actually make out the modern city of Tel Aviv. The official name of the city is actually Tel Aviv Jaffa. Again, there's some people that are not muted. Tel Aviv Jaffa, the official name of the city. But, nobody calls it that anymore, and Jaffa has really been swallowed up into Tel Aviv and is now a neighborhood, a very fashionable neighborhood of Tel Aviv. When I arrived in the country 30 years ago, it was not a very fashionable neighborhood of Tel Aviv. Had I bought 2 apartments in Jaffa back then, I would have sold one for a small fortune and I would have been living in a really cool neighborhood today, but I didn't have that foresight. And Jaffa has undergone a gentrification. Jaffa, of course, is mentioned in the Bible. If you don't remember, Jaffa is the port from which Jonah departs when he makes his when he flees from God, and later on is swallowed by a big fish. This is a statue with a little fountain that stands in Jaffa. Quite ironic, in Hebrew, those who read the Bible in Hebrew, there is a different word for whale and for big fish. Jonah in the Hebrew writing is not swallowed by a whale, he's swallowed by a big fish, but the statue is of a whale. Jaffa is also mentioned as the port through which Solomon imports the cedars of Lebanon and other building material that comes up to build the temple in Jerusalem. But Jaffa itself is never a holy city for the Jewish people. Jaffa is well known, as we mentioned when we were up in Galilee looking at the avocados. Jaffa is well known for the oranges. And if you look carefully on the oranges, you can actually see the little stickers on the oranges that say Jaffa. Even though these oranges are exported either from Haifa port or Ashdod port or by aeroplane, they still carry the memory of the time when they went out through Jaffa port and they had the stamp on them that said Jaffa. Actually, I like this little advertisement for the Jaffa oranges because we're looking at that same scene in Jaffa. Now we're standing to the north. We're standing where Tel Aviv stands today and looking south at the sites of the early city of Jaffa. What can one see in old Jaffa today? Well, the picture on the top is a living orange tree suspended. It's a piece of art by cables fed with water and fertilizer into that egg-shaped structure in which it grows. It looks kind of surreal, which is the point. Once upon a time, Jaffa was surrounded by orange groves. Most of the oranges exported as Jaffa oranges were grown further afield, but around Jaffa as well, there were many, many orange groves. Those orange groves are mostly no longer, because as we discussed when we were in Galilee, avocados are a much better source of revenue and many other more exotic agricultural products rather than citrus. The second image that you can see is St. Peter's Church. This is the Catholic version of St. Peter's Church. There are St. Peter's churches of other denominations as well. Because if we just saw Jonah and we discussed the events in the book of Jonah happened out at sea. And in the story of Solomon, the incoming building material passed through Jaffa and went up to Jerusalem where the events happened. In Christian tradition, Jaffa is a holy city. Jaffa is a place where Peter resurrects a woman called Tabitha, and this church is built to commemorate that event. And once, this is all mentioned in the book of Acts, and once he is finished resurrecting her, he has a dream in which he understands, a heavenly voice tells him in his trance-like state that he can eat anything. And this is the point when Christianity and Judaism diverge over the laws of kashrut. The church is there, of course, to commemorate the miracle here in the city of Jaffa. And of course, we point that out as we continue along our way. The focus of our story today is Tel Aviv. What you can see is a group of families standing on the sand dunes, and the beach of Tel Aviv, the beach that you can see in the backdrop behind me personally, extended a long way inland. And 66 families decided to leave Jaffa. They couldn't afford prime real estate, so they bought a pile of dunes. That they could agree. But then who got which lot? They had an architect come in, divide the land into lots and some public spaces. And then this image that you can see, which is from April 1909, is when they drew the lots and decided a little boy with a bag of white shells, a little girl with a bag of brown shells, decided who gets which piece of land in order to start building a new city that was going to be called Achuzat Bait. Achuzat Bait, which means a freeholding and a house, was a satellite of Jaffa. Their businesses were still in Jaffa. This was kind of a garden suburb that was planned to be built. And what we can see is from the manifesto that they prepared for this event. In fact, this is in order to encourage people to buy one of the original lots. Therefore, it is upon us to purchase a piece of land on which to build our houses. The site needs to be in the vicinity of Jaffa. It will be the first Hebrew city in which 100% of the residents will be Hebrews, in which Hebrew will be spoken, in which cleanliness and purity will be maintained, and in which things will not be done in a non-Jewish way. And as the city of New York symbolizes the main gate to America, we must modernize our city, and one day it will become the New York, the land of Israel. Sometimes when I have visitors who come to tour the country, say to me, it's just like New York. It's just a big city. They speak Hebrew, but otherwise, well, first, it's a lot smaller than New York. If it reminds people of New York, if it reminds people of a big city, that's actually an example of the success in which they were able to build a city. But the city is, as we know, called Tel Aviv, not called Achuzat Bait, which was its original name. Why? Because Theodor Herzl, we met Theodor Herzl with Ben Gurion down in the Negev on our first day of the tour together. Theodor Herzl writes a book called Der Judenstaat, the Jews' State, which kickstarts the Zionist movement. The manifesto, the political manifesto of the Zionist movement. A few years later, he writes a novel set in that Jewish land that is going to come into being. And his novel is called Alt Neu Land, Old New Land. He writes in German. That's one long opposite German word. Were we to write it in English, and there was an English version of it that was published already in the early 1900s, it was called Old-New Land. Because English grammar doesn't combine words, English grammar puts a hyphen there. And when the book was translated into Hebrew, they couldn't translate it at all because Hebrew grammar, certainly the rigorous Hebrew grammar of back then, did not allow two words that meant opposite things to be put next to each other. And so for Old New Land, they take symbolically word El. El is a mound of civilizations, layer on layer on layer on layer. El, old, and Aviv, which means spring. We will shortly be celebrating Pesach, which is known as Chag Aviv, the spring festival, at least climatically that works where we are. That was the name of Herzl's book. And 2 years after the establishment of the neighborhood as Achuzat Bait, it is renamed Tel Aviv. And the image that you can see, the shield that you can see, is the original emblem of the city of Tel Aviv. It says city of Tel Aviv, Area Tel Aviv. You can see 7 stars because Herzl had proposed that the flag of the land of Israel be 7 golden stars on a white background. So the 7 stars are some kind of homage to Herzl. And you see a lighthouse, because from the outset, Tel Aviv sees itself as safe haven for Jews who are coming from other places, Jews who are experiencing hardships. What we can see here is the early years of Tel Aviv. And the early years of Tel Aviv, you can see pioneers. We looked at pioneers when we were up in Galilee that were establishing the farms and the kibbutzim and farming in the land of Israel in general. And down in Tel Aviv, there were many, many manual laborers who were building a city. They needed to clear away the dunes in order to build a city. That's what we can see in the upper picture. The bottom pictures, which are the front and the back of the other, probably more important building was going on in Tel Aviv. This is a building that we call the Gymnasia Herzliya, named again after Herzl, after Theodor Herzl, and a gymnasia like the European high school. This was first co-ed Hebrew high school. Now, there had been an earlier girls' school in Hebrew. Rabbis had not allowed a boys' school to teach in Hebrew because Hebrew was a language for talking to God, not for talking to people. And the rabbis actually weren't involved in the education of the girls, so they managed to create a girls' school that taught Hebrew. And the idea was that these young women would be the mothers of the next generation, and the mother tongue of the next generation would be Hebrew. And now the Zionists are much stronger, much more confident, and they build a school, Gymnasia Herzliya, which will be the first co-ed Hebrew high school. They also, this is already a couple of decades later, begin to build theater. This is meant to be a city like Paris or Berlin or New York, although most of them had not seen New York. Many more of them had seen Paris or Berlin or Odessa. And they build a theater in which the plays of Chekhov and Shakespeare are produced, translated into Hebrew, and in which beginning of Hebrew theater written by Israeli, not yet even Israeli, written by Hebrew playwrights, and of course today playwrights. The name of this first theater, and of course today in the land of Israel there are several theater companies. The name of the first theater is Habima. And bima is probably a word familiar to many of you. Bima, the podium in which we normally conduct the service in a synagogue. These people were creating a secular Hebrew culture, were very much drawing on traditional language and called what we were building bima. You can also see the leading mother of the theater company in the early years. So she was the celebrity that we had back then also. What we can see over here is the main boulevard of Tel Aviv. It's called Rothschild Boulevard because Rothschild guaranteed the loan of the first 66 families, had enough money to buy the land. They didn't have enough money to build the houses. The bank said, what's your collateral? They said, we'll give you some land. The bank said, that's a pile of dunes. We want real collateral. And Rothschild agreed to provide the collateral. So when the engineers saw that dunes, the gully running through the middle, and all the sand from the dunes would be dumped in the gully, they said, we can't build houses there. We can build a park there. And they ended up building what becomes the Unter der Linde, or the Champs-Élysées of Tel Aviv, which is called Rothschild Boulevard, and very much still in existence today. I always warn my tourists that this is one of the most dangerous things you can do in Tel Aviv, is to walk along Rothschild Boulevard on the wrong side. You'll notice there are two lanes. One lane is a pedestrian lane, the other lane is a bicycle lane, and pedestrians who walk in the bicycle lane take a great risk with their personal health and safety. Rothschild Boulevard today is the home of many multinationals. Rothschild Boulevard is important within the central high-tech story. We'll get to that a little later. From the beginning, Tel Aviv is also about normality. These are two of my favorite images of early Tel Aviv. Firstly, I always wonder whether these young men are wearing underwear or that's actually what bathing suits looked like at the time, but they're certainly strutting their stuff on Tel Aviv beach. But I love the picture of the young woman at the bottom as well, sitting on the beach and camels walking along the beach behind her, because Jaffa Port continues to function until 1936. From 1909, when Tel Aviv is created, all the way until 1936, the port is still in use and goods are brought to and from the port, as we can see. Because the great thing about Tel Aviv is that that has not changed. Well, we don't have the camels on the beach anymore, but Tel Aviv is absolutely a beach city, both for Israelis, but also there are many Europeans who come to Israel for the beach holiday. Many Jewish Europeans, instead of going to the south of France, will come and holiday on the beach in Tel Aviv. And I don't know, about 5-6 years ago, I had a group from a temple family trip, and it was the second last day of the trip, and we got to the hotel about 4 o'clock, and we were going out for dinner. The kids were hanging around in the pool. I didn't have a room in the hotel because I was going to go home and sleep at home that night, but in the meanwhile, I went down to the pool as well, and my group of American teens were horsing around in the pool, and there were a group of British teens right alongside. And the two groups of teens started talking about it, and the American kids said, we just had a wonderful time in Israel, and the British kids said, oh, we have a wonderful time. We've come every year for the last 7 or 8 years. American kids, of course, had seen a lot more of Israel in their 10 days because they'd been on a tour. And the British kids had come on vacation. 1 year, the excursion was to Jerusalem. Next year, the excursion was to Masada. Most of their time were on the beach, in the restaurants, just hanging out. And tomorrow we're going to be going to Jerusalem. We're going to talk about the holy city. We're going to talk about a city that aspires to be a light to the nations. Tel Aviv was always about normality. Tel Aviv was always about creating a normal city and has been very successful in doing that. Tel Aviv is not only a beach city, but as I was saying, many of the hotels have pools, and we can see the story I was telling you about people that come and hang out and play in the pools that you can see. Tel Aviv, unlike Jerusalem, does not have buildings dating back thousands of years. In Jaffa, we do have buildings from before 1909, but in Tel Aviv, most of the buildings that we have are not even from 1909. There is only one of the original 1909 buildings still standing. We have buildings, the earliest buildings that are standing are mostly from the 20s. This founding group of people who came to Tel Aviv, on the one hand, people who didn't go to Jerusalem, people who were not living or not seeking to create a traditional settlement in the land of Israel, but were seeking to create something new. At the same time, they are seeking to create something that is Jewish and new. And if we look at the building, we can notice that it has, in addition to the, we have a date palm, it's decoration in the middle of the building. We have stars. They don't look so clear in the picture. We have stars of David. We have a 7-branched candlestick, a menorah, built into the metalwork of the balcony. They were very determined to build Jewish buildings. In fact, the whole style of the building is called the Sefer Torah style because there are 2 rounded sections and then a flat section in the middle, like an open Sefer Torah looks to us. these people were trying to build Jewish buildings, and some of us like them and some of us don't. We know that the next group of settlers who come to Tel Aviv, German Jews fleeing Hitler, they're not interested at all in building Jewish buildings. They're interested in building state-of-the-art buildings. And what they build are buildings that belong to the International Design School, buildings that are Bauhaus, which was the German branch of the International School. Hitler shuts Bauhaus down. Many of the professors are Jewish, but the ones that are not Jewish are also out of work. And at the same time, tens of thousands of German Jews arrive in the land of Israel and want to build houses. And so Tel Aviv is the city with the highest number of Bauhaus buildings. And Tel Aviv is a UNESCO World Heritage City because of the Bauhaus buildings that you can see. Bauhaus buildings are exactly the opposite of the last building that had all these Jewish elements integrated into it. Bauhaus tries to build functional buildings, clean-cut buildings. The buildings are often painted white to reflect the heat. Remember, they were built for air conditioning. In Germany, Bauhaus buildings all had red-tiled roofs for the snow to run off. In Tel Aviv, Bauhaus buildings have flat roofs, so there's somewhere to go and hang the washing. In Tel Aviv, Bauhaus buildings have balconies to catch the breeze, and the balconies have roofs to give some shade because it is a very hot city. Tel Aviv today is a UNESCO World Heritage City because of Bauhaus, and one of the names of Tel Aviv is the White City because of the many white buildings that are, many of which have been preserved. So the picture at the top is an image from the earlier period, and the picture at the bottom is one of the Bauhaus buildings that has been redone. Back on Rothschild Boulevard, you can see a statue of a man on a horse. That man is Meir Dizengoff. He was one of those first 66 families at the lottery. He becomes elected as head of the committee, and the building that you can see behind him is his house, not as it originally looked. He never has any children, and after his wife passes away, he bequeaths his house to the city as the first art museum of the city, and the building is rebuilt or adapted, adjusted to become the city's first art museum. Dizengoff will die. The art museum will continue. You'll notice that because it was an art museum, it doesn't have windows. It has small windows to allow the light in, but not the heat in, and to not affect the art that was in the building. And it was this building that is chosen by Ben-Gurion in May 1948 to be the building in which the Declaration of Independence is made. So what you can see is how the building is decorated. This is actually a reconstruction of the building, because after the ceremony, they took everything down and they made it once again the art museum. It functioned as an art museum for many years, but it had been very well documented, so we are able to reconstruct it and see what it looked like on the day of the Declaration of Independence. The building went into a 2-year refurbishment just a little while before the COVID crisis. So hopefully, by the time this is all over, the building will once again be running, and we will be able to go inside and see what it looks like. Here is another inauspicious looking building. This is a building not from the as earlier phase. This is a building from the 20s, and this building was the home of David and Paula Ben-Gurion. And we can see the massive library inside the building which was Ben-Gurion's, who was a autodidact and who could read in many, many languages. This is not even all of his diary, of his library, both because of the angle of this picture and because there is another building with as many books down at Sde Boker in the Negev. We visited his tombstone when we were down in the Negev yesterday. It's also another house of his there. The site is free and open to the public. Not that many people come to visit it. There's not all that much to see. But of course, it has maybe shrunk, but not faded away, because the presence of Ben-Gurion is very, very strongly felt in Tel Aviv. And although not everyone may see Ben-Gurion's house, everyone sees the statue of Ben-Gurion on the beach, standing on his head. And truth is, Ben-Gurion, even as an older man, used to do headstands. He believed it was very good for his health. He believed it was good for the blood to flow down to his brain. And there are many, many pictures of Ben-Gurion doing headstands, and the statue, which, as you can see, is on the beach on a winter's day, because if you look behind Ben-Gurion, there's no one on the beach, and that would be a very unusual sight in Tel Aviv most days of the year. I'm including this image, which is really not a good picture, because I couldn't find a better one. I couldn't take a better angle when I was there. This is a mosaic by the artist Gutman, who was a child in one of those 66 families at the very beginning of Tel Aviv. And it's actually got 4 panels. We can only see 2 of the 4 panels here. The panel on the left is very, very yellow. That's the sand. That's when they're starting to build Tel Aviv, and there's sand everywhere, and it's the yellowness of the sand as they start to build. Image on the right, we can see men pushing wheelbarrows, which is already something we've seen, and another man working. I wanted to draw your attention to the street lamp, the people standing around the street lamp, and the people performing a concert over here with people sitting on the grass and watching them. If I said Tel Aviv is known as the White City, Tel Aviv is also known as the city that never sleeps. And we'll touch on that as we go forward. But before we get to the city that never sleeps, Tel Aviv is the startup city. Tel Aviv is home to over 100 multinationals, but Tel Aviv is home to over 700 startups in Tel Aviv. And this map, which is not the most up-to-date map, shows you where most of the startups are concentrated in Tel Aviv. And they say that if you need to reach someone, this is such an intimate ecosystem that you only need to call one other person who might need to call one other person, and then you can connect with anyone who would be able to connect for whatever you need for your startup. And people wonder, why is there so much of a startup culture in Tel Aviv? And one of the answers is the whole city is a startup. It was a pile of sand dunes 110 or 112 years ago now, and it is now a very, very ultra modern city, and a city filled with business people from around the world and filled with startups. There are a few other reasons that Tel Aviv is such a great startup city. One reason is that there are all kinds of government incentives for startups. Not as they start, but once they've got to a proof of concept, they can apply for government loan. Only a few of them will get it, but those that get it will get a loan at very, very good terms. Is one of the ways that the government helps. Additionally, soldiers who serve any unit, certainly soldiers who serve in intelligence units, soldiers who serve in high-tech units, when they leave the military, the intellectual property is theirs. They can't leave the army and create a parallel missile protection system. If they can find a civilian application for knowledge that they gained in the military. Israeli government says, run with it, it's yours, do what you can, because if you're successful, you'll be employing people, those people will be paying tax, you'll be selling products, those products will be generating income. And Tel Aviv is really where it is. There is a startup in Haifa. Haifa, after all, has the Technion, which is Israel's MIT. And there are startups in Jerusalem, but overwhelmingly, Tel Aviv is the focus of startup. You can see a sense of how close they all are. We move on to something else. A very, very sad event happened in Tel Aviv. This was the assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin on the 4th of November, 1995. He had been addressing a rally and was coming back down to his car, or to his driver who was waiting in the parking lot where the cars are parked there today. An assassin was waiting for him and murdered him. The monument looks like an earthquake because it was an earthquake in Israeli society. And the stone says here at this place, on a Saturday night, gives the date, 4th of November, and the Hebrew date, Yud Cheshvan, was murdered the Prime Minister and Minister of Defense, Yitzhak Rabin. Peace will be his legacy. Second part of the monument, actually these metal discs that show you where each of the individuals stood. And we see how the murderer managed to get all the way up to Rabin, even though he had security guards all the way around, and was able to fire 3 shots into his back and kill the Prime Minister. Tel Aviv was thought to be a city with no past and nothing but a future, but once it's been around for as long as it has, so it also has some past now, and it has this monument for the murder of Tel Aviv. We're going to watch a little movie now for a minute. It's nothing for me to do in the market. The market needs to be experienced. So we're going to walk through the market. We will see what's on sale in the market. It was formed before Corona because today everyone would have masks on. You can see fruits and vegetables, spices, the goods. Market is very quiet on this particular day because it was raining. It can be much more crowded. And we will leave the market behind us and continue on to the Tel Aviv boardwalk, where one can rent bicycles. In fact, Tel Aviv is a very flat city, and Tel Aviv is a city with parking problems, and Tel Aviv is a city with congestion. More and more Tel Avivim use bicycles to get from one place to another. And they either have their own bicycles or they use the green bicycles, which can be rented at any one of more than 100 different rental points and docked at any other one. And people pay a very nominal fee. So Tel Aviv is a very young city. Tel Aviv is a very mobile city, as you can see. the truth is that all of this is just a build-up for what Tel Aviv really is. Tel Aviv is the place where Israelis go play. Tel Aviv is 24/7 city. 362 days of the year. The city of Tel Aviv, it's harder to get a table at 10 p.m. than it is to get a table at 7 p.m. And very often when I go out to a restaurant with my American tourists, we have the 7 o'clock reservation because that's the one that's easy to get. And when we're leaving the restaurant, the local patrons are coming to eat. We can see Tel Aviv, a city full of restaurants, full of coffee shops and bars, and full of all kinds of exotic food drawn from the immigrants from more than 100 different countries that have come into the country. And one of the best things to do, either in the market that we were just in or in one of several other smaller markets, is to do a tasting tour in Tel Aviv. I could not have a screen without a shot of shakshuka. Shakshuka, originally a Libyan dish, which is eggs poached in a tomato mixture, served in many of the hotels as a breakfast food, eaten by Israelis at all times of the day and night. In fact, many people will say shakshuka is an Israeli food, but it's just an example of how the foods that have come from all over the world have become symbolic of the way we do things in Israel. This idea was further developed with the establishment of a food court in an area called Sarona. This is a food court, but you're not going to find your McDonald's and your Burger Ranch or Burger King and your Domino's. Those fast food options do exist in Israel. This is a food court of the celebrity chefs. This is a food court where a lot of the food is really, really interesting and really, really different. And it is filled at lunchtime with people from the business sections in the area. And it's also very, very close to the IDF's main headquarters, and with a lot of soldiers that choose to come eat here rather than eating in the army canteen as well. Still on the topic of food, this store says Mizrach Ma'arav, and then in English it says Asian store. Mizrach Ma'arav means east and west, and this is a store selling all kinds of products used in the preparation of Asian food. I'm not talking here just of a little bit of soy sauce. I'm talking about some quite esoteric products, because Israel has a large population of Filipino domestics and Thai workers who've come into work here on contracts. And most of them, if they have some free time, or if they live somewhere, would choose to live in Tel Aviv, because Tel Aviv is the cosmopolitan big city. Jerusalem is far more, as we'll see tomorrow, far more of a symbolic city, far more of a city with hundreds of years of history. They may go visit Jerusalem, but if they want to live and if they want to go shopping for products to cook their meals, Tel Aviv is much more likely to be the place. Tel Aviv is also filled with graffiti. We're not going to be looking at much graffiti now, just in fact, this one image. This is an image of two people kissing. When you look closely, you will see there are two Orthodox men kissing, the one in a black hat and a black coat, and the other one with the kippah and the peyot, the side curls. And in Hebrew, this appears in many places, this piece of graffiti, because it's a stencil. So whenever there's a clear wall, it can be sprayed on. The words in Hebrew written in the Torah font say, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. And of course, love thy neighbor as thyself is the translation written in the rainbow colors, because Tel Aviv, the same reason as the foreign workers, more comfortable in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is the gay capital of Israel. And in fact, Tel Aviv beat Rio and Sydney 3 years in a row as being the most gay-friendly tourist destination. Jerusalem is a very friendly tourist destination, but I doubt very much that Jerusalem would be characterized as a gay-friendly tourist destination. Tel Aviv, last year, of course, all disrupted by Corona. Tel Aviv has a Pride March that has typically 150,000 people at the march. Many of the people, most of the people at the Pride March are not gay. They choose to come to be part of the party that Tel Aviv has as being this great and mellow and accepting kind of city. Same reason as I mentioned, that's friendly and acceptable to foreign workers. Tel Aviv is well known for its Pride Parade. Tel Aviv, even though it's a place where people come to play, is also a place with some great museums. I don't have images from the Diaspora Museum, which was re-released this week. Diaspora Museum, formerly known as Beit HaTfutzot, now known as Anu, which means us or we, has been re-released this week. I haven't yet got to see it, and so we're not going to visit it. Instead, we're going to be visiting the Tel Aviv Museum of Art, which has won all sorts of prizes, not only for its exhibition inside, but for the design of the building as well, which is really part of the idea of Tel Aviv, cutting edge. And I'm going to take you inside to see just one piece of art in the museum, my favorite piece of art, and not quite fitting with the kind of ethos that I've told you about Tel Aviv, but a very, very important piece of art. The famous Jewish artist before Marc Chagall was someone called Maurizio Gottlieb. He only lives to be 23 from 1856 to 1879 in Galicia. And this piece is called Yom Kippur. What's striking about this piece is that there are many women, there are only 9 men in the picture. Now, it could, of course, just be the vantage point. This was not, in his time, we weren't counting women in the minyan. He himself appears as 3 different people amongst the men, as the child, as the guy in the center of the picture with the coat of many colors or the talit of many colors, and as the older man, who he never gets to be. And a very, very important piece of art in the Tel Aviv Museum of Art. Focused on him because I wanted to focus on a Jewish artist, perhaps an artist less well known to you. The Tel Aviv Museum of Art houses all kinds of collections, all kinds of exhibitions, including leading exhibitions from all over the world. We're going to go to one museum. We're going to end our visit in Tel Aviv, this museum. This is the Peres Center, for Peace and the Peres Center for Innovation is a completely hands-on museum. People can come in. It is all electronic. It is all possible screens to touch. There are all kinds of examples of those startups that we spoke about before being translated into usable technology. Perhaps one of the most interesting is a machine that makes water out of the air. Now, you've probably seen that, there are pipes that carry the water that comes out of an air conditioner and carries it away. There was an Israeli army unit fighting in Lebanon. They were out of water. They were not sure that the water sources that they had were quality water. So one of them put a bucket below their vehicle's air conditioner, and the water that came out of the air conditioner was enough to sustain them. And when he came back and created a system far more efficient, not designed to cool a room, designed to take the humidity out of the air. And there are mobile units that are used by our military, but also mobile units that are prepared to be deployed in places where there is an earthquake, or places where there's some kind of calamity and water supply has been disrupted. It's only one of many different exhibits in the Paris Center for Peace and Innovation. This is what the building looks like from outside, but it's like an iceberg. You can go down several floors down into the ground, and becoming a must-see destination in Tel Aviv. Behind the Paris Center, those are the houses of Jaffa. So Shimon Peres was always a visionary man. He said, I don't want this to be built in the affluent north of Tel Aviv. I want this to be built in the poorer south of Tel Aviv, to create jobs for the people that are there, to create an aspiration for the people that are there. And indeed, when he retired, and his last few years after he was no longer last of his public offices, which was president, he could be found at work in the center. We're standing with our back to the sea, looking at the building. If we turn around, we can look back out onto the Mediterranean, and we can see a sign written in English letters, Dream Big. If I were to try and summarize all of Tel Aviv, take you back to those 66 families standing on a pile of sand dunes, I would say that from the get-go, people of Tel Aviv dream big. In many ways, it epitomizes the Zionist idea of there are no problems, there are challenges. What do we do to make it work? So I'm going to stop the share, and Adrian join us. Do we see her? I don't see her today. And
she was there.
it was there.
Adrian
No, I
Miller,
just want to thank her publicly, and she's all and I never get to do it, for the pictures that she gave us. Some of the pictures that are pictures that she took. So see that Diane was on, so hopefully she heard me and she can pass that as well. So if there are questions or comments that people have, I'd be happy to answer it. We saw a lot. It's a very different vibe to each of the three sites, very different vibes one from another, and tomorrow will be different again. But any questions or comments that anyone may have?
Mookie, it's Teresa.
It's Teresa.
A number of years ago when I was visiting Tel Aviv, it was sad to see Dizengoff, which was so good, such a come down from what it was. And people said at the time that when they built that circle square, it cut off traffic and it really damaged the city. Have they done anything to rebuild Dizengoff as to what it used to be?
So the truth is that Tel Aviv has built a number of focal points that are, instead of Dizengoff, one of them was Sarona, where we saw that upscale food court. There's the old train station in southern Tel Aviv. There's the port in northern Tel Aviv. What they actually did was they got rid of didn't get rid of what messed up Dizengoff was they had a circle that was on 2 levels.
Right.
They got rid of it's now only on ground level again. They redid all of the buildings around that circle, which were classic powerhouse buildings. It's just a spectacular site now. Many restaurants, hotels, I think Dizengoff is on its way back up. There are also many different venues in Tel Aviv. I don't think Dizengoff is necessarily going to go back to what it once was. If you go to the northern end of Dizengoff, if you're looking for a garment for a really, really special event, the boutiques that sell those kind of garments to be found on North Tel Aviv. The kind of boutique that if it sells 2 or 3 of those garments a month, they're doing okay because those garments are not cheap. So Dizengoff is kind of more upscale, and as you go south down Dizengoff, it becomes more entertainment, more restaurants, that kind of thing. And then as you get down all the way to the south, there's a very different, much younger vibe as well.
Thanks.
Sure. Other questions or comments? Before we...
Just a comment. This is Priscilla from Urbana. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Okay. I don't know if I'll get to Israel. I've never been. But if I don't get there, I feel like I've seen a lot of it that I didn't know, and learned a lot that I didn't know already. So I appreciate the chance to do this.
It's my pleasure, but you need to thank the Rabbi and Teresa who got this together. And also, we already started talking, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, that there will be a trip and by the temple to come to Israel. So hopefully you'll be able to join that trip or one of many other trips. There is a real sense now that we're moving towards some kind of reopening. We are 55% people that are now vaccinated, and a whole lot of relaxations in the rules that we've had. Hopefully you'll be able to come, but don't miss tomorrow, because tomorrow we're going to Jerusalem, and we've left we've left the diamond in the crown for last. As you can see, I'm passionate about the desert, Galilee, and Tel Aviv, but of course we have Jerusalem coming tomorrow as well.
Okay, I'll look forward to it.
Good.
Thank
So
you, Mookie.
folks, my pleasure. Just the word about tomorrow. Today we've been in Tel Aviv. We've been on the beach. Jerusalem is a city in which a modest dress is required. I know it's winter, so you're not going to be dressed too casually. We will be visiting sites of religious importance tomorrow in Jerusalem, and of course, if I've struggled to on each of the 3 days to squeeze everything into an hour, so Jerusalem is really going to be a challenge, because we have 3,000 years of history on our trip tomorrow. Questions or comments from anyone?
Mookie, Teresa.
Yes, Teresa.
Is that the American consulate now in the rainbow colors behind you in the photo?
So no, that's the Dan Hotel. The American consulate is just out of screen, south or to the right of the Dan Hotel. It's interesting. The American Embassy building still stands in Tel Aviv, and the sign on the building got changed. And I haven't been past it probably in the year of the Corona crisis. I haven't been down to the area of Tel Aviv. The sign was changed to read U.S. Embassy Branch Office, because the Jerusalem Embassy was very important symbolically, and by the way, was widely supported by Israelis, even if many of us thought more could have been leveraged out of the move than just moving the building. Nevertheless, widely supported in Israel, but it's a symbolic building. When I went to the United States a few months after the embassy had been moved, and I needed my visa, we have to get a 10-year visa to US, and I needed my visa to be renewed, I was sent to Tel Aviv, not to Jerusalem, as I had been 10 years before. And as I had been 10 years before that. Yes, there's an embassy in Jerusalem, but almost all of the work of the embassy still takes place in Tel Aviv.
Thanks.
Sure. Okay, so Rabbi, any comments before we end?
I just want to say it's wonderful to see so many people on this call and to be able to experience Israel through Mookie's experience and through his eyes, because I can tell you, having gone to the land of Israel, you're seeing a lot and hearing a lot of the same things that we did. And if it feels like you're there, that's exactly what it feels like. So it should. But we thank you, Mookie. Thank you so much for doing this. As Priscilla said, it's really, for some of them, it'll be a once in a lifetime opportunity.
So my pleasure, and I wish you all a good day, and I look forward to going to Jerusalem. Good evening, and I look forward to going to Jerusalem with you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mookie.
Okay,
It
my
was
pleasure.
lovely.
My
Really
pleasure.
enjoyed it.
Laila
Bye,
tov.
everybody.
Laila tov. Good night to you all.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Olamot
Sure,
Paz.
sure.
Thank you.
I will have them. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.